Okay, so a bit more progress here on the several A&L prototype cars that I'm in the process of restoring. So just to recap quickly, when I purchased the A&L prototypes from Chris Alec, who was the one half of A&L, Alec and Lane, he sent me essentially 2 full cars, or enough parts to build 2 full cars, plus another chassis for a third car. And one of those chassis was the actual car that he raced at the Worlds. That was the long wheelbase chassis. If you go back at the prior videos I did on this, I talk about the long wheelbase and short wheelbase chassis. This here is the short wheelbase chassis. The long wheelbase chassis, that's done. It's upstairs in my cabinet on display. I guess technically it's not done. I still got to do the wing mount and the wing and the body, but the rest of it's done. So I figured in the meantime, what I would do is take the short wheelbase chassis, tear it apart, clean it up, put it back together, and that would be my restoration for this. This has been a really straightforward affair to do this particular chassis because there's a couple of missing parts, but really it's just a matter of cleaning everything up and putting it back together. I did have to do quite a lot of turtle wax bug and tar remover on the lower plate here to get all like the tape gunk off and all that stuff. I took the chassis protector off the bottom. There was a lot of residue there I had to remove from the bottom because I wanted to have the sort of the fresh chassis here exposed. I also needed to take that off just to get to all the screws because that chassis protector was covering all the screws here. So, I had to remove it. So that was probably the most involving part of this, but the rest of it was pretty simple. Most of what you see here is original in that it was included with what Chris had sent me. There are, a few things here or there that I did have to supplement with. So for instance, this caster block I had to replace with one of mine because the one that was here broke. This one, as you can see, is already cracked here, right there, but it's not broken just yet. So I'm going to keep that there as it's an original part. The ball ends, I had to supplement. Those are my ball ends that I put on there. 2 of these Technocraft turnbuckles I happen to have lying around. I supplemented those because I only had 4 additional ones from him that I could use for this. So, little things here and there, but what I tried to do is keep everything thematically consistent, or like the same type of part, like the same type of turnbuckles with the caster blocks. These are I don't believe these are the 30-degree caster blocks. You can tell by how the holes look. So I had to make sure that I not only got a white caster block, but one of the correct angle, because Team Associated did make white caster blocks that were both, I think, 15 degrees and 30 degrees. Something like that. So you got to make sure you get the right one. I just happened to have this lying around, thankfully, from an older RC10 build. The arms cleaned up nicely. The only thing that I wish I had was maybe an unbroken bumper. But, again, original parts. This is what's left to work with. I did not take apart the gearbox. The diff is nice and smooth. Maybe it could be re-greased a bit, but it's fine, especially for a display model. I just cleaned up the outside, put everything back together. So I do have to mount a spur gear here, but everything else went together just fine. The next step here will be maybe one of the trickier ones, which is to say the shocks, because I only have 3 shocks left from what I got. The other 4 shocks were used on the long wheelbase car, so that car is all built. What were left in the parts bag that I got were 3 shocks, and these 2 here would be for the rear, and I got 1 shock for the front. And I want it all to look the same, so I figured let me dig through my collection of associated shocks to see if I could find something that would work well. These are basically RC10T shocks. So I have gold body RC10T shocks that I think would go nicely on this. And I wanted to use the gold body ones instead of the kind of gunmetal looking ones, because the gold body shocks were used on the other car. So I'd rather put gold body ones on this one as well. To, again, try to keep everything thematically consistent. So I got to clean these up. You know, these came from some truck that I got. And, you know, put all the right collars and ends and everything on it that are consistent with what he would have used in the buggy. So this will be the next step. And then once those are on, then it's kind of done. I'm not sure if I'd want to mount electronics on this one because I don't have any peak motors that I could put in here at the time that this was raced. At least at the time the other car was raced at the Worlds, Chris was running peak motors. So I have a peak motor in that car. I could find one and put one in here, but I don't know exactly when this car was run. It probably wasn't run at the Worlds. It may have been run afterwards at some other event or as a development car, in which case, who knows, you know, what kind of motor he was actually running with it at the time. So in that case, I just keep it, you know, no electronics in here for now. One thing I want to do is this kind of my own little swizzle is just to put the Yokomo front wheel adapters on this. And the reason I want to do that is kind of a complex one. So on the other car, it has the Yokomo square wheel hubs for the rear wheels. And depending on what kind of wheel you're running, let me just get them out here. This and this. So this is one of the wheels that was actually run at the 91 Worlds. The dirt you see on this tire is Detroit dirt, as far as I understand. Now, this has the Works style Yokomo rims, okay, which have very shallow offset, essentially zero offset. If you were running these rims, then on this square hub, you would put a little extension to account for that offset in the rim. And that hub extension I put on the other car, which has another set of these rims on them. So, but I only have one pair of those hub extensions. I'm pretty sure. I checked through the parts bag and there are no more in there. So if you were going to take that hub extension off, you'd have to run the 870 style rims, which have a deeper offset that pushes the wheel out. But the only 870 rims I have are pink ones. And I figured, well, why don't I just get some reproduction pink rims for the front and the rear and put those on this car so I can run pink rims all around. I think that would look kind of nice. So that's kind of an additional little thing that I'm doing myself to this car. You know, historically he would have run just the older RC10 style wheels on the front, but I want to make it look a little nicer than that. So that's one change I'm going to make. So for all of you historical purists out there, if you don't like that, you can just eat me. Anyway, hopefully that covers everything. We'll see where this one goes. Again, I got to figure out if I'm going to put electronics in this or not, because I have all the period correct or event correct electronics in the other car that was run at the Worlds, the long wheelbase car. I don't know exactly when this was run. I don't think it was a backup car for the Worlds, because he did make other cars that may have been the backup cars for the Worlds, because this is the exact same type of car as the other long wheelbase car. This is a different car. It was run at a different time, most likely, so might take different electronics. If the other version of this was run at the 91 Worlds, maybe this was run a year or two later, in which case the Novak M1C that I put in there might not be the right speed control, right? Maybe it would have to be a different version of the M1C, or maybe a 410 HPC. So I got to sort that out. Anyway, this is where I am with this car. This really just took me like a day or two to take it apart and clean it and put it back together. It was not a big deal. I just did have to make sure to take pictures along the way, because there's a bunch of little spacers and things that you got to make sure you don't forget to put them back in exactly the right location. But But yeah, that's kind of it for this. I will be finished with this one pretty soon. I just got to wait on some more flange bearings to come in so I can mount this one on the other side. And then do the shocks, and that's kind of it. So, that is it for this one. After I finish this one, I got to get to this one. So here's the story with this. This is the other chassis that Chris sent me that was sort of the spare chassis. So I had 1, 2, and the third one that's upstairs that was the actual car that was run at the Worlds. So this one here, I don't quite have enough parts to make it a complete car. I probably, and you know what, actually I probably do. It would take a bit of work, and I'd have to supplement a lot of my own parts to do that. But that's one chassis that I have to complete, okay? And then the other one, the final one, is this one. These are all of this kind of prototype car, to my knowledge, that were ever made of this style. The only other A&L prototypes in existence for their two-wheel drive buggies was the trailing arm style prototype, which does exist. So Daryl Lane, who was the other end of Alec and Lane A&L, his son inherited all of his stuff when he passed away. And he has that car. I don't know if he wants to restore it himself or sell it or whatever. That's his business. That's fine. And that preceded this car. So I think that car might have been run at, like, I don't know if it was run at the Worlds, but it's definitely made before these cars. And we talked about that a little bit, he and I. So I think there's only 3 of these really in existence. There's this one, there's this one, and the other one I got. So this one obviously, you know, needs a bit of work. This would also need to be restored. So I got to finish this, and then I got to do this one, and then I got to do that one, and then they'll all be done, the original cars. And then after I'm done with the originals, then I got to build the reproduction car that I got from Jeff Millar, who is the current owner of Factory Works A&L. This one will be built as a runner, but that one's got to wait for all of these others to finish up first. So that's kind of what's going on. I bought this from Daryl Lane's son last year, just so that I can have all these, that we, so to speak, can have all these cars in the same family, in the same place. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of work to do it all, but I'll get it done over time. And yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.